and welcome to a Casual Cinemedia bonus episode. My name is Chris.
My name's Justin.
And my name's Mike. Today we're going over the new reboot for Tomb Raider, starring Alicia Vikander and directed by Roar Uthog. Uthog? Do you guys know how to say this guy's last name?
Yeah, I think you weekly pronounce his first part of his name. It's Roar.
Yeah,
Roar
Uthog.
It's more of a sound effect than an actual name.
He's listening right now and he's like, oh, I've never heard that one before, guys. Good one.
Yeah.
I think he's Norwegian, so we're losing the Norway audience.
Sorry, Norway. If anyone that lives in Norway with that last name, write us in and let us know how to pronounce it correctly.
Yeah, and if you want to write it into us and let us know how to pronounce things correctly from Norway, you can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Casual Cinemedia. We have a Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/Casual Cinemedia. You can also email us directly at casualcinemedia@gmail.com.
Yeah, and don't forget, while you're at it, we have the iTunes contest going on right now. So go ahead and submit a 5-star review, write something about us, give us some feedback, constructive preferably, and then email it and snapshot it to us. And what we'll do at the end of the month, we're going to pick one person at random that does such a thing, and we're going to let them pick a movie for our bonus episode. So go ahead and do that for us. We'd appreciate it.
Okay, so let's talk about Tomb Raider.
Laura, your father's gone. But you can pick up where he left off. It's in your blood. I'm sorry. I'm just not that kind of Croft.
So at the beginning of this review, we're going to have a non-spoiler section. And then we will give you guys fair warning before we move into the spoiler territory. So that way you guys can duck out and see the movie and come back and finish, or just power on through if you do not care about spoilers for Tomb Raider.
Yeah, which you shouldn't.
All right, so before we actually begin the review, I wanted to ask you guys, what is your relationship with the Tomb Raider franchise, be it the video games or the movies?
I have not seen any of the movies at all. Any of the Angelina Jolie ones, which I guess there were only 2 of them, right?
That is correct, yes.
Yeah, I haven't seen any of them. I have never played a Tomb Raider game in its entirety, but I had an original PlayStation 1. I guess it was just called a PlayStation at the time. It was before they even dubbed it a 1 because there was no 2 coming.
You're so cool.
I'm so old, really.
Yeah,
but
me too.
Old equals cool, I guess. I'll take that.
Old school cool.
Yeah. But I had a demo of it on some game, or maybe it was I subscribed to a PlayStation Magazine, and maybe they sent like a demo with the magazine, but it had like one level of a Tomb Raider game, and that's all I could play. I played it a few times, so I kind of got the gist of it, that you hang from rocks and climb and stuff and solve puzzles here and there.
Yeah, so you're pretty much like a Tomb Raider expert.
Yeah, more or less.
Okay, good. How about you, Chris?
Yeah, along the video games, I'm probably similar to Justin. I haven't played a lot of them. I have played some of them and never finished the game. So if that factors into what I'm like, where I am at with the games. The movies I have seen more, or I've seen the first Angelina Jolie movie, but I did see the second one, but it was one of those where like played in the background or something like that.
Yeah, clearly it made a really good impression on you.
Yeah, I was going to say, it sounds memorable.
Yeah. And I guess I would say, about the movies, I was never impressed with the Angelina Jolie movies very much. The games were more fun, for sure.
Right.
Yeah, what about you, Mike?
I've actually never played any of the Tomb Raider games. My girlfriend played the new ones, like the rebooted Tomb Raider games that came out a couple years ago on PS4. And they look pretty cool. I saw the first Angelina Jolie Tomb Raider back in theaters. Now that I think about it, I don't think I could tell you anything that happens in that movie.
Jon Voight's her dad.
Oh yeah, Jon Voight is her dad, and Daniel Craig is in it. Anyway, so that's kind of where we're all at. What were you guys' expectations before actually going into this movie?
For me, a game that I have played that's similar to Tomb Raider would be Uncharted. So I kind of expected Uncharted, the movie, but with like a female version.
Do you feel like you got that?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I agree with you. It feels a whole lot like Uncharted. I've played all those, and they're great.
I played the first one and started the second one, but that's as far as I've made it so far.
The second one is the best one. What about you, Chris?
Oh, I haven't played Uncharted. When I went into Tomb Raider, what I was expecting and what I really wanted was a fun movie, kind of mediocre. It was kind of what I was expecting it to be, a fun movie where I could turn off my brain and I didn't have to do a lot of thinking while I watched it. And that's kind of, those were my expectations going into the movie.
I was probably right there with you guys. I don't think I was expecting too much. You know how video game movies are. I think we've all kind of learned not to expect much out of them. But I was also hoping that this would, break tradition, because I'm all about having like a new fun adventure franchise to look forward to. I like Indiana Jones quite a bit. I like fun action adventure movies. So I'm kind of right there with you, which I didn't really expect much of anything, but I was just hoping for like a fun ride. That's kind of where I was at. Are you guys ready to move into our actual thoughts on the movie?
Yeah, so my thoughts on this film are that it's a very earnest film, and I think Alicia Vikander does a good job in it, but ultimately it falls short of even my expectations of a mediocre film. I'm not a big fan of this film. I enjoyed parts of it. I enjoyed watching Dominic West from The Wire in there, and Walton Goggins. Watching Walton Goggins in this makes me appreciate what a good script can do for an actor. The difference between this and Justified, in which Walton Goggins is also in, is pretty amazing. Walton Goggins, who I love, is not that great in it, and I really want to like him in it. And Dominic West. He was also in the 300, Dominic West, but The Wire is his big role.
Yeah, he played her dad, right?
Yeah, and Walton Goggins was the villain in there. But ultimately, like I said, it doesn't live up to my mediocre expectations. And I don't recommend anybody seeing it unless you wait till it comes out on DVD or Netflix or whatever. How about you, Mike? What do you think?
I'm more in the positive side of things than you are towards the movie, but only just, right? Like, I'm not going to defend this movie for very many things. Okay, here's what I will say. I enjoyed large segments of this movie at a time. Like, there'd be times in this movie where I would spend a good 25 minutes being completely into what I was seeing, especially once the action starts getting going. But that being said, every time I would start finding myself into it and enjoying myself, there would be a really terrible cliche, like, script error, right? Or script decision that I just cringe at, right? So, but then again, there's also some good twists in the script as well that I didn't see coming and that I think ultimately make it better than it would have been. So I was expecting something more along lines of other video game movies, like the previous Tomb Raiders or the Resident Evil movies. And I think this movie is, while not good, it's miles above those things. And I would say that it's easily the most entertaining and watchable video game adaptation that exists so far.
Yeah, but that's not exactly saying
No,
much.
it's a very low bar, but I'm just trying to be the glass half full here, devil's advocate, So what about you, Justin? What do you think?
I think that I line up a bit more with Chris.
Sure.
I pretty much did not enjoy this movie, and mostly in the sense that everything was so average and
Right.
okay that it was worse than watching a bad movie at times, because it was just so uninteresting. And for me, what I expected, I look forward to hearing like what parts that like were twists or whatever things that you said surprised you.
Twists might be a strong word. And
Sure,
I think
any elements, I guess,
Sure.
anything at all.
Sure,
that
yeah.
surprised
we'll
you,
go
because
to
I didn't feel surprised in the least by anything. I think the first quarter of the movie, I was actually it was surpassing my expectations because I had a pretty low bar going in, but I was actually finding myself thinking like this might actually turn out to be good depending on where it goes from here. Like I think the first quarter or so, but the final three quarters, like everything about it was just so average, like straight down the line, like 5 out of 10 for me. And I mean, maybe the first quarter was like hovering between a 6 and a 7 out of 10. I'm not saying it was great,
Right.
But there were elements of it that I really enjoyed. I think you're right when you say that there are these cliche moments that come in, that it's a mixture for me of like cliche script moments and cliche adventure moments. I felt like I'd seen everything that happens in it before in other maybe adventure video games, maybe Indiana Jones movies. There wasn't anything unexpected to me.
Sure. And let me, real quick, before I get painted as the guy who liked this movie, let me go ahead and just say my expectations going into this, like where you were saying this is probably about like the last 3 quarters are about a 5 out of 10 for you, and it sucked. I was expecting nothing higher than a 5 out of 10 going into it, right? So I think it comes down from, like you guys, like, well, I don't know, I don't want to speak for you, Justin, but Chris was kind of mentioning he wanted like an adventure, like a fun adventure. And I agree that that's what I wanted, but I expected something more along the lines of the Angelina Jolie version of Tomb Raider. And maybe that comes from not having played any of the Tomb Raider games, so I'm not really sure what to expect from a Tomb Raider movie, other than the one movie that I've seen. But yeah. I was expecting a lot more supernatural elements to come into play, and was pleasantly surprised whenever this movie turned out to be like the most grounded video game adaptation that exists, while still being action-packed, but it's much quieter and less like special effects driven than I thought it would be, if that makes sense.
I agree with that point, and there are other elements that I was surprised like weren't in there as much as I thought they were going to be. Particularly, there wasn't a lot of attempts at humor, which I kind of expected it to like kind of try to hedge its bets on being funny here and there, and there's not a lot of it, and there is a couple moments. There's
a Nick Frost scene that I find pretty charming, kind of, because I like Nick Frost, but
I like Nick Frost, and as much as I like him, like it just did not work for me, and I was glad that there wasn't more of that. But like, so basically, if you're thinking that you might be able to laugh and have a good time at this movie, I don't think that you will, because there's not much humor
funny
in it, and what's there, at least in my opinion, wasn't funny.
Yeah, I think the Nick Frost scene didn't feel like it had a place in the movie. Like it kind of stuck out. Like if Nick Frost had gone with her to the island and was quipping and, you know, making silly jokes like a short round from Indiana Jones or something like that, then you would have gotten something a little bit better.
I don't know. I think that would have gone with what Justin's saying, which is like too much Nick Frost. Like Nick Frost has 2 scenes, and I thought the first one was bordering on being too much while still working for me. The second one didn't work for me at all. So I don't know if I would want more comic relief from Nick Frost.
Yeah, well, I think I'm kind of coming off of the last blockbuster movie that I saw, being Black Panther, where I thought they put in way too much like comic relief and humor that then none of it worked for me, like 0 laughs for me. And so I was expecting that sort of thing, you know, and especially being a video game adaptation movie, I expected more entertainment coming out of like attempts at humor, and I was just, to the film's credit, I was relieved that what wasn't happening.
And that's kind of my like half-hearted defense of this movie, which is just that while not being a great movie, it's so much better than like any of the Resident Evil movies or the Angelina Jolie movie from whenever that movie came out.
What are other video game adaptations? Max Payne, I guess.
Yeah, Max Payne, which was just god awful. We got Assassin's Creed with Alicia Vikander's husband, Michael Fassbender.
Oh, I didn't watch that.
A couple of years ago. Yeah, I didn't either, but everyone said it was terrible. So
Warcraft.
Yeah, Warcraft.
Supposedly bad unless you're from China.
Right, yeah, exactly.
As far as the comic relief goes, I actually felt like that was missing from it. I felt a lack of the comic relief, and maybe it was going to be bad, but I missed that aspect of this adventure film. You know, like in Indiana Jones, you have Indiana Jones saying one-liners, and they're funny to me, genuinely. I don't trust the script to make funny one-liners, but to me it was missing.
Yeah, well, all the best humor from Indiana Jones comes from Harrison Ford
and his charisma.
And Indiana Jones, and
right.
Some of the main characters, and I feel like what they're doing in this film, if any of those characters tried to also be funny, boy, would it not work.
It'd be painful.
I don't know. I just felt like something along those lines, or a little bit of levity. Maybe it takes itself too seriously.
Yeah.
Would have helped the movie
Yeah,
for me.
And what I'm saying is, I think you would need an additional character than what we have
Right.
in the movie.
I agree.
We only have the regular characters that have dramatic arcs and
Right.
interests and motivations, and them being funny.
That was kind of my point about Nick Frost. If he had been in it as a different character, but if he had gone to the island with her and he
Right.
kind of was funny and goofy, he's capable of that. I don't know if the script is capable,
Sure.
but he certainly is.
Yeah. Well, you guys ready to move into spoilers?
Yeah,
Absolutely.
real quick before we do that, I wanted to say that I think there's a criminal underuse and maybe misuse of Kristen Scott Thomas, because I was very excited when she was popped up in it, because I had not watched a trailer or looked at anything for this film before. So she popped up, and I wanted more from her.
Yeah, absolutely.
She's so good. Not that she was doing anything great in this film, but
Yeah. I was like, she
That-
didn't
and
really
that's
get a
the
chance
problem.
to do much more interesting stuff. So I feel like putting her in there more maybe would have resulted in even more disappointment.
yeah, I think we can touch on that too in the spoilers as well.
So let's do it. Let's move into spoilers for Tomb Raider starting now.
So it's really weird in this movie when she had to deactivate the atomic bomb. Yeah, anyways.
The atomic bomb.
The- Actually, there was kind of an atomic bomb in this one.
Kind of.
Sort of.
Kind of.
Where do you guys want to start? I guess I could start at the beginning. I will just maybe switch gears on how I've been talking about the movie, and we'll say something very positive. I actually really enjoyed, as like the simple first act action set piece, the like Fox and the Hound bike chase thing. Like, I thought just conceptually that was kind of interesting, and like her motivations for doing it, for like needing money,
I hated that.
was
honestly.
working for me.
I did
No?
not like that at all. But I'm glad you liked it. I'm glad you did.
It was one of the things I truly, genuinely liked. It like, it obviously had nothing to do with the story, but I just thought it was actually like well shot and well executed, like practical action chase scene. Like, there didn't seem
Sure.
to be a lot of like CG, if
Oh,
any
right.
CG
Yeah,
going
yeah.
on in it.
Well, I think overall the special effects and the way this movie's filmed isn't that bad. It's actually pretty decent looking movie, I think, in a lot of places. There's some places where the CG gets pretty rough. Overall, I think it's a competently made action movie. I'm never confused as to where anyone is or like the geography of what's going on.
I think I would disagree with that. Like the boat crash sequence, I was very confused as to or maybe it was the theater where it was dark, but I couldn't tell exactly what was going on, where the boat was, where the cliffs were. Maybe that was part of it too, but I just didn't have a general idea of what was going on in those scenes.
It was hard. It's like a dark scene, and the background is all the same because it's all violent, crashing waves.
Like lightning.
And they
Right.
shot it kind of dark. So like, all of a sudden, on one side, there's like a giant rock that seemed like it was, a couple of miles away, like a minute earlier. That happened to me a little bit. I didn't worry about it too much because I was just like, oh, it's chaotic, whatever.
Yeah, I didn't worry about it in that scene because it seemed like they were supposed to be disoriented and the waves were slamming them up against various rocks and you don't know where anything is and it's all foggy and you're not supposed to see anything.
Well, I guess my complaint would be that I couldn't even tell exactly where Laura Croft was, and maybe that was a problem with the theater where it was too dark, the projection was, but I couldn't exactly tell where Laura Croft was or where the boat was. I mean, I couldn't even see her necessarily on the screen very well.
Oh,
is what I
wow.
would say. Yeah.
That does sound like your theater was probably too dark. But it is a dark scene. Are you talking about the scene where she jumps up and goes across the boat because it slams into the rock and the side of the boat caves in, so she has to monkey bar her way across the deck? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't confused during that scene, but I can see how it would be confusing. Yeah, so back to what Justin was saying earlier. The chase scene at the beginning, I like that it has a lot to do with Laura's character, building her up, about who she is. I just wish it would have been something a little more, not necessarily even related to the story, but something more related to who she's going to be. Something more adventurous than just a race. Have her climbing mountains or hiking or something more to where I can believe that she would become a Tomb Raider by the end of the movie.
Right. I think in the end of the movie, or by the end of the movie, I should say, that never paid off, because I did think that it would come back in some way. Not necessarily that she'd have to ride a bike through a tomb or something like that.
Right.
But something where we see the translation of, being in this bike race. Like maybe she would have to step up and take on some challenge, even though like all the odds are against her, like she did there, where they're basically like, some dumb idiot will never win this bike race. And she's like, you know what? I'm that dumb idiot. I'll do it, or whatever their conversation was. But like, we never had a moment similar to that. It doesn't pay off in any way. And I think in that sense, I agree with you. But in the moment, I thought that it was, really developing the character, and that it was a good scene that was entertaining. And like I said, well shot, but you're right. It doesn't go anywhere. And looking back on it, that could go entirely and it wouldn't matter, because we already set up that she needs money and doesn't have a lot.
Yeah, that's kind of where I am on that scene. What I did like, though, is I like the setup of the plot. It feels, and maybe it feels like a Tomb Raider plot, but like I said, I'm not the most familiar with Tomb Raider, but it feels like Uncharted to me. Like the setup is perfect. There's a cool mystery kind of based loosely in history. There's an uncharted island and a mystery about where her father disappeared to. All that kind of stuff is a great setup for an adventure movie. I wish it had been executed a little better. Like there's some twists that are so apparent at the beginning of the movie that are coming. I don't know. Did you guys believe for a second that the father was dead at any point?
No.
I actually did, because that's a common theme with Tomb Raider, is that the dad is dead,
right?
And she has to go off and finish his work. So
okay, so that's
why I thought that it was. Yeah.
Okay. Well,
but I wasn't surprised that he was alive either.
I wasn't surprised that he was alive, but I was worried it was going to be even lamer than it ended up being. Right. So like my fear was, because like there's a scene in the beginning of the movie very early on when she discovers like his secret tomb, like his Batcave, like his adventure.
Yeah,
the adventure
room.
All his records and his like studying and
right. Yeah. Well, there's a point where she discovers that, and she's looking through the notes of Himiko, the supposed like resting place of Himiko, this Japanese ruler from a long, long time ago that was supposedly like really evil and everything she touched turned to death and all that. And she supposedly had a bunch of servants and she can control minds. My fear was that she would get to the island, find Himiko, and she'd end up having to fight her father, who was like being mind controlled by Himiko, and that's why he never came home.
Yeah, some sort of supernatural element
right.
to it.
And I was so sure that that's what was going to happen in Act 3, and I just like resigned myself to it, right? And I was like, well, this movie's going to be god awful. Here we go. And I strapped myself in. So I think when she got to the island and it was just like, hey, he's alive, that wasn't good, but it was, in my opinion, better than my worst fears.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What did you guys actually think of when she found her dad? Did you guys find that at all satisfying?
In some ways, I think maybe from the dad's perspective, I liked what they did in concept with him having seen her before, like as a mirage or
Right.
hallucinations. I think the script writing or direction is bad because we get those scenes where he's looking at her and then he goes back to the fire and he's like, just don't look at it, ignore it, and it'll go away. These are hallucinations. They've happened before. And we just get him like
explaining it to us.
Explaining all that. Yeah. I was going to say expositioning, but that is not a word, I don't think. But anyways, yeah, he's giving that all to us, and it just felt like very written lines so that we get the point. And it didn't work for me.
He also seems crazier, and then about 10 minutes afterwards, he's completely sane, which felt a little cheap to me.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, everything when she finds him just moves so quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Like, to me, that's the biggest sin of the movie. More than any confusing, dark action scenes, more than any, like, terrible action movie adventure cliches, the rushing through the only scenes in the movie that could possibly have any kind of emotional resonance really rubbed me the wrong way. Yeah. And I understand why they did it, because people who go see Tomb Raider didn't show up for Lara Croft's backstory, I guess. But, I did. I don't know Lara Croft's backstory that well.
Yeah, and I think that's a mistake if you're the studio, to think that they're not there to see her backstory, because if you make a good backstory, you make a good film, it'd be a great film, and you can do a ton of sequels and it'll make a lot of money, as opposed to, I think what they did in this movie a lot was give shout outs to the game, where you're just like, this is the only reason they're doing this is because it's obvious. It's an obvious callback to the game, But if you had gone in with story first, it could have been a really good movie. And that's kind of one of the things that disappoints me so much.
Yeah, well, look at Black Panther and Michael B. Jordan's character in there. They made him have a really good character, and everything that I've read or heard about Black Panther and people talking about it is a strong response to Michael B. Jordan's character. And it's all the stuff that, happened to him in his past and what he's trying to do. It's not like, oh, remember when Michael B. Jordan had that fight and he was really badass, right?
Right. That's secondary. I think you're right. There aren't really characters in this movie.
No, and well, they set up the stuff with her dad really well. Like the whole reason she's poor and struggling for money in the beginning is because she won't sign the papers basically saying that her dad is officially dead, and
right.
In which case she could then get inheritance and have all the money she could ever want, but she won't do it because she doesn't want to admit that her dad's dead. Yeah, and that's good. Like that goes into that first quarter of the movie that I was enjoying. Mm-hmm. But you're right, they rush through it once we get to him, and it's a one-dimensional use of a idea that could have been really good.
Exactly. Yeah.
The movie ultimately, I think, feels like it doesn't feel like they put a lot of thought into stuff. For example, at the very end, when Walton Goggins is crossing the ladder bridge, she's chasing after him, and she leaps out to the middle of the bridge, which seems like just about the dumbest thing she could have done.
Oh, God, yes.
Because she could have just knocked the bridge down, and he would have fallen to his death. And so it was just a thing.
Well, hang on a second. I know she ends up doing this anyway, knocking it down. But if she'd have done that initially, she would have just trapped herself on the other side.
She did.
Right away.
Oh.
Well, I know she ends up doing that after she realizes that she needs to. But initially, running and jumping in front of a guy who just got shot, I don't think is as stupid as knocking the ladder down and then...
Didn't she also have her bow and arrow still?
I don't think so.
She
was
just
hauling ass at that point because she knew her dad was about to blow everything up.
Yeah.
She has like the thing that you stick into the rocks to like help you.
No, she had to go pick that up. She had to go pick that up off the ground.
When she first comes, doesn't she like...
She has it when
doesn't
she runs up there, yeah.
Throw it into the ground and then jump into the ladder?
Maybe.
Because now I remember she could have just thrown that at him.
She could have thrown that at him. She could have come up behind him and pushed him off. Like it just seemed like her thing. Like I had the thought when I saw it was like, that doesn't seem like the right choice. Like
right.
That's a weird choice because she could have slipped, missed, fell, ruined the whole thing. She could have like been hanging there and not been able to pull herself up fast enough, and he could have like stepped on her fingers and knocked her off. Like it just seems like so many things could have gone wrong.
Yeah, there just wasn't. It just feels like there's not a lot of thought put into this. They're like, what's going to be cool is if she runs out and jumps out there. Where they could, all right, let's think about this for a second, and instead of doing, it'll be cool, but instead of doing the coolest thing, the first coolest thing that comes to our head, why don't we think about it and then try to do something that makes sense?
Yeah. There's a lot of that stuff that happened in the movie for me where like another one was when they were escaping and the guys are shooting at Laura Croft while she's running away. I think this is the first time that her friend Lou Ren helps her escape. The henchmen guys are firing at her and he knocks out like the like zip line type thing that's on the cord. I don't know what it is exactly, but it's got like the hook and it's on a wire.
That's lifting things up the mountain.
But yeah, he like cuts that and that goes flying around like the whole forest and like zips around and then like perfectly takes out the legs of like the guy that hit it. And it's an action that doesn't make sense. And it feels like they didn't think through of like, what would this character actually do at this time? Would that make sense for them to do? Did anybody else think that during that part? Because I thought that was a really like speculative like idea to disconnect that thing.
I don't remember the part you're talking about specifically, but when she was getting away, there was a part whenever two dudes were trying to shoot at her, and then I think like they either ran out of bullets or forgot to cock their gun or something like that, and they have to like stop what they're doing and do like a really obvious like cocking of the gun or turning the safety off or something like that before they start shooting at her.
Yeah.
And it allows her to get away. I remember that part offended me with how stupid it was.
Yeah, it just feels like a lot of lazy how do we get them out of like X situation,
Right.
and taking like the lowest common denominator,
first
the
thing that
first
comes to
thought.
head.
Yeah. If I can cite one more example where it feels like they just really didn't think too hard about the actual script and events and some of the dialogue. A part that made me laugh out loud in the wrong way was whenever Lara Croft, she wakes up and the boat is in the middle of a storm and she's being thrown everywhere, and she goes and finds Lu Ren, and he basically says 4 lines in a row that on their own would have been enough to understand what's going on and would have been like the right thing to say. Like he says, I'm trying to remember, I couldn't remember the quote exactly.
You're saying if he says just one line, that's all he needs to say, but he says 4 of them.
Yeah, he says 4, and it's like we're dead in the water, and then he says this boat's going down it's going to sink, and then there's like we need to get off this boat, and there's a 4th one I can't remember, but it's like 4 things that like
All say the same thing.
they all say the same thing, and they could all equally be a trailer line. And he says them like there's no response in between. He just says all 4 of them back to back to back to back, and it's like it's almost like they couldn't decide which one was the good line. So it's like we'll just put in all 4.
Real quick, I wanted to ask you guys about Alicia Vikander and how you think she did in the movie. Given we all know that the script isn't the best, but what did you guys think about her performance?
It's hard to tell. I think it was fine.
Yeah, I think she's really watchable. There was nothing that she did in this movie where I was like, that was the wrong choice, you know? Literally everything that I have to complain about this movie is from a script/directing standpoint. I think she is the best part about this movie and the most watchable part about this movie, and certainly the thing that appeals to me the most about this movie. Like, I thought she was great in Ex Machina, and I thought she was great in The Man from U.N.C.L.E. Yeah, and what was that movie she did with Michael Fassbender last year?
The Snowman.
No, about the lighthouse keeper.
Annihilation.
While you're looking that up, I will say that, you know, we talked about earlier, her character stuff was underdeveloped, underutilized at least. Like it had a good foundation, but they didn't really build on top of it well enough. There's also things that I think would make her character more interesting is if we understood a bit more of her process of like how she is solving some things.
The Light Between Oceans. That's what it was. Go on.
I've never heard of it, but anyways, so like she's got those little puzzle code things and she's working out codes, and like with her solving the door, like the entrance to the tomb, like did you even understand like remotely what her thought process was with like breaking those code things like at all?
Exactly. That was one of the things I was thinking. I'm glad you brought that up, but there's no world building, so you don't understand what she's doing. The outside world doesn't make any sense, or you don't understand what kind of world they're living in, right? So she has to solve this puzzle. We don't know anything about this puzzle. We don't know anything about it, and she just solves it, you know?
Yeah, we do get it whenever they're in the room where like the floor's falling, and we understand the thought process that's going through as she's trying to solve this puzzle, because we're seeing like, oh, it's got to be a color. Mm-hmm. None of the colors are working, and we hear like the memory flashback of like or whatever's like above the door, and then she figures out it's green, and you can follow that. But like there are several other puzzles in the movie that it's just like we just assume that, oh, she's smart so she can solve puzzles,
right? But even in the door one with the gummy bear keys is what I call them, we never really got. I didn't even know that you could put 2 colors in there at the same time. Maybe I missed it, right. But like I wasn't clear about how the puzzle worked. You know, so you're right. We did get her thought process, but I couldn't help solve it with her because I was like, "Can you put 2 keys in there? Is that what you need to do?" You know, and so I just didn't feel like I was a part of it. It didn't make sense necessarily to me.
We need the scene like we have in Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, where you get her with her father's journal, going through all the clues that he's worked his whole life to try and solve. Right, so she has the instructions with her about how to open the door and how to navigate through this tomb, and that's why she's got the leg up over Walton Goggins, is because she's the only one that can make sense of her dad's journal. Walton Goggins could never do such a thing because he's not her daughter, you know, his daughter. Like, I think that would have made all that a little stronger. Like the actual tomb raiding sequences, I think, where like emphasize the journal a little bit more. You have this plot device that you've already put in the movie, make it more important. Like Walton Goggins is already after it, and he even says like, this is what I need. be shameless about it and do the exact same thing that The Last Crusade did, and use that journal to make her better and make the tomb raiding sequences more interesting.
Yeah, it's like he says that that's what he needs to get in, and it takes him to the entrance. But
Then
once he
doesn't know
gets
what
to
to
the
do.
entrance, he still needs the dad or Laura Croft to solve the puzzle for him because he's too dumb. So it's like just this weird thing that they underutilize.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's her only connection to her father, or one of the only connections as she's going through. So if my father, who I thought was dead, I would want to read that over and over again, you know. So, and I don't feel that connection with that book at the beginning either, you know.
Okay, so they go to Himiko's tomb, which, by the way, I did a little research on Himiko, and apparently she was a real person whose burial site is actually a mystery, and apparently she was buried with like a whole bunch of servants and stuff, which I thought was cool. So the end, when they get to her tomb, and the mummy's there, you know, I was expecting any second that we were going to get some stupid monsters or stupid zombies or like all those handmaidens that were sacrificed to go into the tomb with her were going to come back to life, and we were going to get like Brendan Fraser the Mummy, you know? We were going to
we
like
did
an
get-
army of undead.
Yeah,
We
I
did
was
get
like,
close to a zombie, though.
not really.
I think, well, once the disease takes over that guy,
He doesn't become a zombie and try to attack. Well, I mean, he tries to like fight somebody. That's not the same thing. I mean, it's a little.
that was the
it's-
vibe I got from it.
Sure, it's a little supernaturally, I guess, but
Well, no, not necessarily that it was supernatural zombie. Like whatever the disease is, kind of took over, and he just kind of goes all
like a violent nutso
crazy.
guy.
And you're right.
Yeah.
There
But that's
is
like a 10-second scene. That's
It's as supernatural as like 28 Days Later.
right.
basically.
And I found that to be really refreshing. Like the idea that they're making a video game movie, but they don't feel the need to put like the video game supernaturalness and like ridiculousness in there. There's a lot of other ridiculous things in this movie, but they do spare you bringing an ancient Japanese ruler and her undead army back to life, and instead they give you something not necessarily probable, but something more based in reality, like the idea that they locked her away because of a disease, and
which they
because
thought was magic.
right, which they thought was magic, because they were so scared and they just didn't understand how disease worked, that she was just a monster, you know? I thought that was interesting. That's more interesting than just like she was evil, so they locked her in an island and didn't tell anyone where she was.
Yeah, I agree. That's probably the best thing that happens for me in like the whole, basically the whole second and third act was that concept.
Yeah, and there's not
And,
some sort of CG baddie that she has to fight at the end.
Exactly. Like that was so relieving. Just the idea that it was just a short 5-minute fight or less between her and Walton Goggins. I get bored with long drawn out fights. You know?
Yeah.
Especially if it's already not an interesting movie.
Right, exactly. So like by the end of it, I just wanted it to wrap up and not offend me with stupidity, like the Resident Evil movies do, or like I remember, and I didn't see the second Angelina Jolie Tomb Raider, but I remember very distinctly the reason I didn't see it was because in the trailer she's underwater and she punches a shark in the nose, and I was like, I'm done. You know,
That's
nothing.
never happened to you?
No, and I'm pretty sure it's never happened to anyone. For all
Didn't
its
happen
faults,
to that guy. Do you remember that YouTube video where that guy like survived getting bit by a shark and he was just like, I just punched that shark?
I've heard you poke
Do
him
you
in
guys
the
remember
eyes
that?
or something.
Maybe.
I remember a
It's
YouTube
shark.
video about a bear that has a chihuahua, and the guy's like, he's after my chihuahua, so I just punched him in the nose, and the bear ran off. And he saved his chihuahua. Anyways, let's...
It's
What a
both.
hero.
But anyways, sorry for interrupting you, Mike.
No worries. But, you know, they could have easily, like, let's put it this way. If there had been, like, a crazy supernatural baddie at the end with, like, undead legions, that wouldn't have felt out of place. And I
Right.
would have walked
No.
away hating it just as much as I thought I was going to hate it, you know, before I went into it. So, as faint of praise as that is, that's what I will offer.
Well, I think it says something that one of the best things about the movie or parts that we enjoyed the most is like what it didn't include.
Right, yeah. That it didn't include our worst fears?
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess that's not even a praise for the movie.
Yeah, you're
It
just
is and it isn't.
surprised that it didn't happen, and so you're like, well, that's nice. Yeah, and I agree with you. I just think that it's just not enough to make it worthwhile.
No.
You know?
And I will agree with you that I'm disappointed in the lack of Walton Goggins getting to do anything. let him be Southern. He's hiding his Southern accent in this, and everything where he shines, he just gets to be like a nutso redneck.
Yeah, he is completely wasted in this because I was so excited when I found out that he was going to be in it. I was like, well, if nothing else, at least Walton Goggins is going to be in it, and I get to watch him. And it's saying something when I'd rather watch Alicia Vikander than Walton Goggins because he is so good and so watchable in everything I've seen him in.
I don't know. She's pretty watchable, too, in everything.
No, she is. But I just think that Walton Goggins is wasted in this.
No, yeah, that's definitely for sure. I am super disappointed. Like, I want him to be more menacing and get to like chew some scenery and be a little more like fun and like give him some affectations and make him interesting. Instead, he's just like this soft-spoken guy.
Yeah, they set up his 2 children and they didn't take that anywhere. I was waiting for the moment where like he would have been a great surrogate father, right? So, and you have the 2 fathers fighting over her soul or something like that, which isn't necessarily original, but I was expecting something along those lines. And he has his 2 daughters that they never do anything with, like to give him some sort of grounded realism in in who he is.
Yeah, I mean, look at something like Apocalypse Now, where you have a character who's been in the jungle for a long time, or stranded, and you don't necessarily have to go that far with like the way that Marlon Brando was, but like that performance is interesting, and he's not on screen that much. And you could take Walter Goggins and Dominic West's character, add them together, and multiply them times 1,000, and they're not even close to as interesting as Marlon Brando. Like they just don't do anything with them, and I'll apply that to like every character, even including like Alicia Vikander / Laura Croft. Like everyone is so one-dimensional and flat, and just ugh.
I'll tell you one thing that just made me roll my eyes more than anything, which is I think the thing that took me out of it the most was probably the part, like we get this kind of set up earlier in the movie when she recruits, what is it, Luke? What's the guy's name?
Lou Ren.
Lou Ren, to bring her to the island. And she's like, your dad disappeared about 7 years ago, am I right? And he's like, yeah, it is. Yeah, you're right. That's exactly right. And then later when they're on the island, you get like the slaves being like, I'm with you. Your father died for us. So we're just going to die for you no matter what. And it's like, you guys have just been slaves on an island. You don't know this guy. You don't know who his dad was. This is stupid.
Yeah, like how did we know that they know that that guy was his dad? Obviously he didn't do that much for him because they're still slaves.
Yeah. Do you guys think that there's parts missing from this movie? Not
sure, maybe
that they didn't write it, but they got cut from it that may explain further about the characters. Like there's stuff on the cutting room floor. There's like an extra half hour somewhere in the director's cut that'll make this a better movie.
I mean, it's possible. It's maybe they did the Justice League thing where they were like, well, we got a stinker on our hands. Let's just try to make it as short and watchable as possible so we can get a higher turnover.
Yeah, I think like the average script is 120 pages, and with a script or screenplay, it translates in theory to a minute of screen time per page. Mm-hmm. I would guess that this movie was probably more than 120 pages, probably more in like the 140 range. Mm-hmm. So I think there's probably at least 20 minutes of movie that's not in here. That might make it better, might not. I don't know.
Who knows?
Yeah, maybe if they trimmed down the action and added those scenes, we would have like a more satisfying arc for her. But really, who cares?
Yeah, who cares? Does anyone want to give their final thoughts or have any more to add?
If I was going to give this a scale of like 1 out of 10, I'd give it a 5.5 or 6. Probably a 5.5, not quite a 6. But let's put it this way: if there are sequels, it is still quite possible that they could like make good sequels from this starting point. I wouldn't be surprised if there was like a good Tomb Raider 2 if they got a different director and they tried a little harder. It's not like it's a lost cause franchise. But that being said, I don't think they will do that, and I'm pretty sure if we do get a sequel, it will be terrible.
I agree.
Along the lines of that, what was the ending about for you guys where she saw that the Croft Industries or whatever it's called actually...
I assume that was just setting up from the video game world.
I think but was that like, oh my gosh, we own and are part of the bad guys, or was it... What I took it as was it that she realized that even the Croft company owned the supposed bad guys. So even if they had gotten there, the Croft had the backup plan of owning the company anyways.
No, I think what I got from it was that Kristen Scott Thomas, she's running the other entity. What was it called?
Panta or Panka or something like that. Something with a P.
The Trinity. Wasn't it called Trinity?
Yeah,
There
something
was a
like that.
secret
Yeah,
organization called
Trinity
the
was
Trinity.
the organization, but on the boxes, like when we had the flashback to like the boxes that the slaves were carrying, it was a P word, and when we actually see the list where the company's named, it's a P word. It's like Panta or Panra or something like that.
But I think it was that Kristen Scott Thomas was helping the Trinity, or was part of Trinity, and it's setting up a sequel.
Right, like
and
she's
again,
been evil the whole time.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, and again, we just don't have enough, at least for me, to understand that. I couldn't tell if she was evil because I got the idea that she was evil, but I didn't understand that because I didn't know what that corporation was actually doing and what their goal was, because that corporation had a different name than Trinity, because I understood that Trinity are the bad guys who are trying to get to this and, you know, have supernatural powers, but this other company with a different name that was underdeveloped, and I didn't understand. So I guess that's just like the maybe like 20th example of like underdeveloped script, which leads me to my final thought. I mean, I think that this movie is just super weak on the script. I couldn't tell what was bad acting versus bad writing at times. I think it's full of cliches. We didn't really touch on this, but there's a lot of suspension of disbelief of physics that you have to do, and the movie doesn't have good enough characters that I enjoy or like or am interested in or interested by for me to like look past the physics, because it really rests on that sort of stuff, that the action being great. And I find myself a lot of the times questioning, like, how would that actually work? Would that actually happen?
Right, because you're not into the movie, so you start nitpicking.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
All right, I guess we're done for this week on Tomb Raider. Justin and Mike really loved it, where I
100%.
was a little bit more on the fence.
Yeah. I'm going to go back again tomorrow. That's not true. I'm not going to do that.
So thank you for listening. Thank you, Jake Wagner Russell, for doing our intro and outro music. You can hear more of his music at soundcloud.com/bopscotch.
Up next, we'll be doing a Casually Criterion episode on Sallow, or the 120 Days of Sodom, the feel-good hit of 1975.
Yeah, it's basically like Tomb Raider, just
With more poop.
just more food.
Much more poop.
Yeah. And also this week, we started advertising, if you listen to our last episode, a friend's nonprofit charity organization that he's started up. It's called Real Outreach, REEL Outreach. They have a website, realoutreach.com. And what they're doing is they're basically working on providing underprivileged families and children the opportunity to go see a movie in the movie theater, because families that can't afford to, so that they are bringing in kids from like Boys and Girls Club, kids from foster homes, and just generally kids who can't afford it. And I think it's a pretty great cause.
Yeah,
I agree.
absolutely. Sounds awesome.
Some of my best memories as a child is going to the movies with my parents, and I would like to be able to help provide that experience for kids.
I think that's basically their whole outlook, is that kids like to escape. They like to go have fun at the movie theaters, get popcorn, and their first movie that they're doing, their first event, is going to be for Avengers Infinity War, which is coming up within like the next month.
And that's
Nice.
a great one to do it for.
Yeah,
It's
and
gonna
I
be huge.
think I think it's just fun for these kids, especially if they're less fortunate or in need, like to have this opportunity to go and just escape for a while, if nothing else. There are multiple ways that you can give to the organization. If you go to their website, which again is realoutreach.com, you can do a one-time donation that just generally goes to the organization. You can set up a monthly recurring donation that goes generally to the organization. They are also doing a GoFundMe specifically for this Avengers Infinity War, where you can give money specifically to send a kid to go see Infinity War, and that's on GoFundMe. There's a link to it on their website.
Can we link it to the show notes below?
Yeah, absolutely. The link to the website will be in the show notes, and just one last time, that's realoutreach.com.
All right, so you can like, follow, and subscribe to us on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram at casualcinemedia, on facebook.com/groups/casualcinemedia, or email us at casualcinemedia@gmail.com.
Absolutely, and don't forget that you can enter into our contest to pick a movie for one of our bonus episodes. Just rate us 5 stars and then take a picture of it and send it in to one of those outlets.
Yep, do that on iTunes, just for clarity.
Yeah, so I guess until next time,
Bye-bye.
bye.
See you later.